Zoids lore time. Why do some Zoids have cockpits and some don't? So, to clear up any confusion, today we're going to go over what Zoids exactly are. You see, Zoid is an overarching term that can encompass several different things, much like if you were to say a transformer or an animal. There are subgroups in there to be more specific about what exactly you're talking about. So, this video is going to be going over the four main groups of Zoids, those being wild Zoids, combat Zoids, stray Zoids, and blocks Zoids. Way out in space, on the far end of the Milky Way galaxy, there exists a planet called Planet Z. Brief interjection, there are a couple of pieces of Zoids media that don't take place on Planet Z. A couple of them took place on Earth. I believe there was one that took place on Planet Zoid, and I think there was an ice moon involved in one of them. But the majority of Zoids media takes place in Planet Z. So, the inhabitants of Planet Z are strange metallic animals with a knack for combat. These would later come to be known as wild Zoids. These are essentially giant metal animals. They do not have cockpits. But the more you look at their biology, the more they start to resemble fungus. Although if you look into biology in general, it all starts to get weird. Science is pretty weird. Sci-fi even more so. Speaking of weird biology, it seems over time the wild Zoids evolved and their organs slowly condensed more and more into what is known today as a Zoid core. Zoid cores are essentially the heart, mind, and soul of a Zoid, but this core also functions similarly to a super efficient nuclear reactor condensed in a small ball, something we've been unable to replicate using scientific means. Now, I'm sure all of you are wondering by this point what the heck a Zoid with a cockpit is. If wild Zoids are naturally occurring critters on Planet Z, what are these things with cockpits? Zoids with cockpits installed, like Liger Zero, Genosaur, Shield Liger, all your tried and true favorites, are what are called combat Zoids. You see, originally wild Zoids were taken into battle, much like we would use horses. This was shown in older lore, but it wasn't really animated until we got the 5th Zoids anime, Zoids Wild. The next step was upgrading these wild Zoids, adding equipment, weapons, that kind of thing. This again was in older lore, but it wasn't really showcased much until the 6th Zoids anime, Zoids Wild Zero. And then lastly, we moved on to combat Zoids. Combat Zoids are what happens when you remove the Zoid core from a wild Zoid and place it into a man-made machine body using that Zoid core as a power source. It was the 80s, sci-fi was big and morals were scarce. But yes, that's essentially what combat Zoids like Liger Zero are. They are machine-made bodies powered by the heart and soul of a wild creature. This does mean that combat Zoids are sentient living creatures. They are not simply mindless mechs. They have their own varying degrees of independence, even if their bodies are artificial. I should also mention that there are combat Zoids that don't have cockpits, like Saber Lion down here. Little Diloforce over here also doesn't have a cockpit, but he is indeed a combat Zoid. There's also many species of what are called attack Zoids, which are itty-bitty little combat Zoids that also frequently don't have cockpits, so not every combat Zoid has one. Now, onto the third subject, stray Zoids. For those of you who've seen the anime Zoids New Century Zero or Zoids Chaotic Century, you might have noticed that some combat Zoids wander around on their own, which is a bit unusual. As I mentioned before, most combat Zoids do have varying degrees of independence, but usually they don't do much without human intervention. They'll just stay quiet in their hangar. But apparently this is not always the case. In the case of Leon's Red Blade Liger and the White Gordos from Zoids Chaotic Century, these combat Zoids were wandering around autonomously without a pilot at all. These are what's called stray Zoids. They're not wild Zoids because they do have artificial bodies, but for one reason or another they've managed to escape and they've just kind of been wandering around autonomously, making decisions for themselves. It's a pretty interesting concept that really leans into Zoids being sentient creatures, and those aren't the only two examples of this happening. In the original battle story lore, the first thing Death Stinger did when it was activated was immediately kill its pilot, its allies, everything around it, and wander off into the night. And Gojulus the Ogre fought its last battle autonomously without its pilot. So yeah, it's a thing that can happen. Zoids can simply end up wandering around autonomously without a pilot, thus becoming a stray Zoid. And now on to the last topic, blocks Zoids. Block Zoids are interesting little creatures that started popping up towards the tail end of the original battle story lore. Essentially what they are is artificial Zoids. Their bodies are made of these little cubes here, which are called blocks, which are essentially artificial Zoid cores. They're not as powerful as a real Zoid core, but this way you're not going around harvesting organs, you're just kind of making cubes. Another benefit of the blocks technology is you can arrange them in many different shapes and link them all together without having to worry about the Zoid core being overloaded or confused. So while blocks might not be as powerful as real Zoid cores, you can get super creative with what you can do with these things. Some block Zoids are even unmanned drone type Zoids, so not only are you not harvesting the organs of a real Zoid to make this thing, but you're not even risking the life of a human pilot sending this thing into battle. So I would say it's definitely much more ethical to use block Zoids as opposed to traditional combat Zoids. So yeah, hopefully that clears things up a bit. The reason that wild Zoids don't have cockpits is because they're natural living animals, so they're not born with cockpits. Combat Zoids traditionally have cockpits because they're machine-made bodies. Stray Zoids are combat Zoids that have for one reason or another wandered off autonomously, and blocks type Zoids are artificial Zoids. Zoid on.